Hey everybody, this is Dalton with Coding of Z. In this episode, we're going to look at using the Prisma ORM, which is a TypeScript ORM, and we're going to look at it in relation to Create-T3 app. If you haven't used the Create-T3 app, it's an exciting project that is community built, that is an opinionated template for starting off, your next web application. I'll have links to it below, but they've got pretty good documentation, and this is kind of how we're going to start off. In this episode, we're going to be kind of switching between Microsoft SQL Server and Postgres and showing you how that functions within Prisma. And so the first thing I need to do is I don't have a Postgres server set up for this. So let's go ahead and paste this in here. So I'm just going to stand up a Docker container with Postgres for this particular purpose. Probably typed my password wrong, I'm sure. Always do it wrong the first time. All right, so the Docker stood up. Let's just make sure everything looks good. And yes, I've got my Docker up and running. So if we switch over to pgadmin, and I do a refresh, let's just do this. Let's disconnect from the server and reconnect. There we go. And so you can see here, I've only got the one database here, which is the default Postgres database within this new database server we just stood up. Like I said, we'll be switching between that and Microsoft SQL Server. So this is the server I'll be using for Microsoft SQL Server. You can see right now I've just got the one database called YouTube running on this particular server. All right, so the next thing we want to do is switch over and just make sure we're running the latest version of Node. I am not, I'm on 16. So let's use the Node version manager and install the latest long-term support version, which is 18.14. So now if I do node.v again, I'm now using node 18.14. Sweet. And the next thing we want to do is to create our app, right? So right now I've only got the SQL kata from a previous episode I made. So let's do this. Let's do npm Create-T3. Wow, T3 app at latest. And you can get this command from this website. That's all that is. Nothing exciting there. So what do we want to call this thing? Let's call this YouTube T3. We'll definitely use TypeScript. Here's the different packages it's automatically going to bring in if we want to. I'm just going to go ahead and bring them all in, even though I'm really only covering Prisma in this specific episode. Sure, why not? And would you like to run npm install? Sure. The Prisma project has really good documentation, so I'll put a link down below for Prisma, but if you want to go look at Prisma, what it does, the documentation is actually really good. So I won't cover anything in detail that I'm not covering specifically for this video, but they definitely have more stuff if you want to go read about Prisma and how to use it. Cool, so it gives us our next steps. We can't really follow those next steps to the T because we need to set up our database connection. It comes pre-configured for SQLite. I'm not using SQLite. Like I said, we're going to look at switching back and forth between Postgres and Microsoft SQL Server. So let's go ahead and go into this and let's open this up in VS Code. Let me blow this up just a little bit more for you. There we go. All right, so this application comes with Prisma models for handling your authentication, your users, and your sessions. We'll leave those in place, but the first thing we want to do is get rid of or change our connection. So let's change over first to use Postgres. So to do that, we're going to go up to the top of the schema.prisma file, and we're going to change SQLite to be the Postgres SQL. And then we're going to go to our .env file, and I'll just comment that out for now. And we are going to switch this to our Postgres connection string. There we go. That should be it. So we should be able to now run the Prisma command to create our first initial migration. So let's do that. We're going to do npx Prisma migrate dev. All right, so it looks like everything's pretty good there. We'll just call this migration an initial migration. And boom, our initial migration is done. So if we switch back over to our project, you'll see there's a new folder here for migrations. And if we drill down into that, you can see the SQL it generated to create our tables that match our models that are defined within our schema file here. If we jump over to our Postgres database and we do a refresh, now we've got a YouTube database that it created for us. And if we drill down into our schema and our tables, you'll see here we've got our tables created for us. So account, example, session, and user. Sweet, everything's working. So there's a couple of ways to create new tables. I'm going to try to go through those as well as switching back and forth between the different database systems. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new model within the schema table. And I'm just going to copy and paste this so you don't have to sit here and watch me have typos. So I'm going to create a new model for YouTube subscribers. It's got 4 fields. You define your field name, your type, and then you can define additional attributes. So in this situation, this is our ID column, and it's going to be an auto-incrementing number for this ID. The fields that came with the canned out-of-the-box models are using these basically GUIDs. I believe they're short GUIDs. All right, so we got our new model there. Let's go create another migration. And we'll call this one our second migration. And it's created it. So let's go back here. Let's refresh our tables. And you can see here we've got our new table here, YouTube subscribers, with our columns. Perfect. Now, during your project, you need to switch over and use Microsoft SQL Server for some reason instead of Postgres. Let's do that. So we're going to jump over here to our schema, and we're going to switch out Postgres with SQL Server. And then we need to jump over to our env file. Let's go ahead and close that. And we need to create another connection string, but this one's going to be for Microsoft SQL Server. So let me copy that to point to my SQL Server instance. Okay. And let's try to do another migration, because right now, if we look at our Microsoft SQL Server, we don't have anything here. So we need to get all that created. And you can do this a couple of ways. You can do it using a migration, which is what I'm going to do to show what errors occur. You could also do it with just a Prisma DB push, but we're going to use migration. And so you can see here it picks up that, hey, wait a minute, you want to use Microsoft SQL Server, but your initial migrations here are using Postgres, and that's just not going to work. And so an easy way to resolve this is to just delete out our migrations folder. And let's run it again. This time it's able to successfully go through and create our migrations. Perfect. So let's go back over here to our databases, do a refresh, and sure enough, we've got our YouTube DB, and we've got our tables, including our YouTube subscribers. The other way that you can create these models is, instead of creating them within the schema file, is you can do a DB pool, a Prisma DB pool. So if you have an existing, if you create a new table or have an existing table you want to pull in from your database directly, you can do so. So let's create another table within our SQL Server database here. I'm just going to create a new table called pet names with a few fields. Let's execute that. Go ahead and close that. All right, so now we've got pet names in our database, but we don't have pet names in our project. So the way we resolve that is we can go over here to our command line and we can do npx prisma db pool. And that should have pulled everything in. It says we've got 7 models now. So let's go look. Sure enough, here's our new pet names model. So now we could write to that using Prisma. All right, then your manager comes back to you and they're like, hey, we've changed our minds again. We're going to go back to Postgres. So let's go change this back to Postgres. So copy this to change our provider yet again. And in our env file, let's just comment out our SQL Server database connection and bring back our Postgres database connection. And I bet you know what's going to happen here. We're going to try to do this migration because right now we don't have pet names in our actual database. So if we go back here and we try to do migrate again, ooh, this is a different error. So when we did that pull, Prisma brought in this special attribute, and this works for SQL Server, but Postgres does not like this. And so Prisma picks up on this validation error and wants us to do something about this. So let's go do something about that. So we're going to go down here to the bottom, and really the only problem is this. And so let's just delete it. All right, try again. And here's the same error we got before where we switched providers, and so our migration scripts don't match. And again, the easiest solution for this is let's just delete it. Great. Run migration again. It's going to reset our schema. Obviously, this is not something you want to do on a production system, but if you're developing against a production system, why are you doing that anyway, right? So let's go ahead and say, yep, we're good. We'll call this initial again. And everything got generated. So if we go look at our project, we've got our migrations folder back here again, which has all of our tables getting created. And if we go to our Postgres database and do a refresh on it, let's refresh our schema. Now we've got 8 tables, and pet names is now in our database, so we can now use that. Excellent. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like this video. I will probably explore more within Prisma as I go along, detailing out some of the other things. Obviously, all we did today was create schema. I would like to do another video that goes through obviously using Prisma to create records, get records, etc. So thanks for watching.